It was a cold November evening in Albany, New York, the kind of night where the wind seemed to bite through your clothes and the dim streetlights barely cut through the mist that lingered in the air. The city, usually bustling with the hum of daily life, felt eerily quiet. In a suburb just on the edge of the city, hidden among rows of identical houses, something was terribly wrong at 1402 Birchwood Drive. Jessica Collins, a 34-year-old marketing executive, hadn't shown up for work that day. Her absence wasn't unusual by itself. People get sick, things come up, but it was the silence that followed that set off alarms. Jessica was always in contact, her phone glued to her hand whether she was texting, emailing, or checking social media, but on this particular day her phone went straight to voicemail. No messages, no activity, nothing. Her best friend, Veronica Hart, tried to stay calm at first. Maybe Jessica was just taking a mental health day. She had been stressed lately, new projects at work, the strain of her long-distance relationship with her fiancé, Ethan Grant. But by the time evening rolled around and no one had heard a word from Jessica, the unease turned into panic. Veronica decided to go check on her. When she pulled up to Jessica's house, the first thing Veronica noticed was that the front door was slightly ajar. Not enough to be immediately alarming, but enough to make her stomach twist with dread. Jessica was meticulous about locking up. She would never leave the door like that. With her heart racing, Veronica stepped inside and immediately felt the weight of silence. The house was dark, too quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath. "Jess?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. She moved further inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the curtains. Everything seemed in place. The keys on the kitchen counter, the mail stacked neatly on the table. But there was something off, an unsettling feeling that grew stronger the deeper she went into the house. And then, as she rounded the corner into the living room, she saw it. Jessica's phone lying face down on the floor. The screen was shattered, and next to it a single red-stained shoe. Veronica froze, her brain trying to catch up with what her eyes were seeing. "Jessica!" she called again, louder this time, panic now flooding her veins. Still no answer. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, the street outside was filled with flashing lights. Detective Samuel Ward, a grizzled investigator with the Albany Police Department, arrived on the scene. He'd seen his share of strange cases, but something about this one already felt different. He questioned Veronica, but she was in shock, barely able to get the words out. Ward stepped into the house, his trained eyes scanning the room. He noticed the shattered phone, the shoe, the eerie stillness that hung in the air like a bad omen. Something terrible had happened here. But where was Jessica? As the forensics team combed the house, Ward couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something, that the house was hiding more than it was letting on. And he was right. The next day, the investigation intensified. Ethan Grant, Jessica's fiancé, flew in from Los Angeles the moment he got the call. He was frantic, desperate for answers. Ward watched him closely as they sat in the station. Ethan's grief seemed genuine, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something else that Ward couldn't quite place. "We were supposed to get married next spring," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "She was stressed, but we were fine. I don't understand. Who would do this?" Ward leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. Was there anyone in her life who might have wanted to hurt her? Anyone who seemed off or who made her uncomfortable recently? Ethan shook his head. "No, Jess was... Everyone loved her. She didn't have enemies. She was strong." Independent Ward wasn't convinced. In his experience, no one was ever as clean-cut as they seemed, and he knew that relationships, especially long-distance ones, were rarely as perfect as people made them out to be. As the days passed, the investigation took one strange turn after another. Veronica admitted that Jessica had been acting strange in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She had been distant, distracted, even paranoid, but she hadn't told anyone why. "She kept saying something wasn't right," Veronica recalled, "but she wouldn't tell me what. Just that she had a bad feeling, like someone was watching her." Ward dug deeper into Jessica's life, and that's when he uncovered the first real crack in the facade. An old friend, Andrew Carlos, who had recently reconnected with Jessica. The two had grown up together in Albany but hadn't spoken in years. And then, out of nowhere, Andrew had come back into her life, sending messages, meeting up for coffee. When Ward questioned Andrew, the man seemed nervous, his answers too rehearsed. He claimed he and Jessica were just catching up, old friends reconnecting. But Ward sensed there was more to the story. And then, when Andrew's alibi for the night Jessica went missing didn't hold up, Ward's suspicions deepened. It wasn't long before the media caught wind of the case. The disappearance of a beautiful, successful woman in a quiet suburban neighborhood? It was the kind of story that captured the public's imagination. Reporters hounded the police for updates, and conspiracy theories began to swirl. But Ward kept his focus. There were too many loose threads, too many unanswered questions. Why had Jessica been so paranoid? Why was her phone shattered? And what was Andrew Carlos really hiding? Then, just when the investigation seemed to hit a wall, a new piece of evidence surfaced. Security footage from a gas station near Jessica's house. The grainy footage showed a car pulling up to her street late the night she disappeared. The driver? None other than Ethan Grant. Ward's pulse quickened as he reviewed the footage. Ethan had claimed he was still in Los Angeles that night. Why had he lied? And why had he been so desperate to get back to Albany? Confronted with the footage, Ethan finally cracked. He admitted that he had flown in to surprise Jessica that night, suspecting that something was going on between her and Andrew. When he arrived at her house, they argued about Andrew, about their relationship, about everything. But then he left. At least, that's what he claimed. "I didn't hurt her," Ethan insisted. "Yes, we fought, but I swear, when I left, she was alive." But Ward wasn't so sure. The timeline didn't add up, and Ethan's increasingly erratic behavior only raised more red flags. And yet, without a body, without more evidence, it was impossible to know for sure. And so the case grew colder, the answers more elusive, the town of Albany gripped by the mystery of what really happened to Jessica Collins. Some believed she had run away, tired of her life and the secrets she kept. Others were convinced she had been the victim of foul play, her body hidden somewhere in the dense woods outside the city. But Detective Samuel Ward wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Because deep down he knew the truth was out there, buried in the lies and half-truths of those closest to Jessica. And he wasn't going to stop until he found it. The mystery of Jessica Collins was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The days turned into weeks, and as winter settled over Albany, the case of Jessica Collins began to fade from the headlines. But Detective Samuel Ward couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. Every night as he reviewed the evidence, her shattered phone, the abandoned car, the fractured relationships, he found himself circling the same question. What was Jessica hiding, and who wanted to make sure she never revealed it? One evening, just as Ward was about to leave the station, a call came in. It was Veronica. Her voice was shaking, barely above a whisper. "You need to come over. I found something." Within minutes, Ward was at Veronica's house. She met him at the door, her face pale, her hands trembling as she held up a small leather-bound journal. "I was cleaning out some of Jessica's things from work," Veronica explained. "I didn't think much of it at first, but then I found this. It's her journal." Ward carefully flipped through the pages, his heart pounding as he read Jessica's private thoughts. The entries started out normal enough, reflections on her day, work stress, and snippets about her relationship with Ethan. But then, the tone shifted. She started writing about someone following her. "I think I'm being watched," one entry read. "At first I thought it was just paranoia, but now I'm sure of it. I can feel their eyes on me." Ward's brow furrowed as he continued to read. The entries grew more frantic, more desperate. Jessica had written about strange phone calls, cryptic notes left on her car, and a dark figure she had seen lurking outside her window late at night. But the most chilling part came near the end, just days before she disappeared. "I found out something I wasn't supposed to know. If anything happens to me, it's because of them." Ward's mind raced. Who was them? And what had Jessica discovered that had put her life in danger? The journal gave Ward a renewed sense of urgency. He immediately ordered his team to look deeper into Jessica's recent activities, especially her work. As a marketing executive, she had access to sensitive information, and Ward couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow tied to a much bigger, more dangerous game than anyone had realized. The investigation took a sharp turn when Ward discovered that Jessica had been working on a high-profile campaign for a local real estate mogul named Richard Page. On the surface, Page seemed like a respectable businessman, but Ward's gut told him there was more to the story. Page had connections, powerful ones, and rumors had always swirled about shady dealings behind closed doors. When Ward brought Page in for questioning, the man was calm, almost too calm. He smiled politely, denied any knowledge of Jessica's personal troubles, and played the role of the concerned employer perfectly. But Ward saw through it. There was something in Page's eyes, a coldness that sent a chill down his spine. As Ward pressed harder, asking about the nature of Jessica's work and whether she had stumbled upon anything unusual, Page's demeanor shifted. He became defensive, his answers clipped, as if he knew Ward was onto something. "She was just an employee," Page finally said, his voice icy. "Whatever happened to her had nothing to do with me." But Ward wasn't convinced. He knew Page was hiding something. And then, just as Ward was about to end the interview, Page leaned in, his voice low and menacing. "Be careful where you dig, detective. Some secrets are better left buried." The warning hung in the air like a dark cloud. Ward left the interview room with a sinking feeling in his gut. He knew he was close to uncovering something, but Page's words echoed in his mind. Was he getting too close to something dangerous? In the days that followed, Ward's investigation hit roadblocks at every turn. Files went missing. Witnesses suddenly refused to talk. And then there was the incident with Veronica. She had been driving home late one night when her car was forced off the road by a black SUV. The driver never stopped, and though Veronica was shaken, she was unharmed. But the message was clear. Someone was trying to silence her, and by extension, anyone who knew too much about Jessica. Ward realized he was dealing with something far more sinister than a simple disappearance. This wasn't just about jealousy or an affair gone wrong. This was about power, control, and a deadly conspiracy that reached far beyond Jessica's personal life. The pieces began to fall into place when Ward uncovered a series of encrypted emails on Jessica's work laptop. With the help of a tech specialist, he was able to decode the messages, and what he found was shocking. Jessica had discovered that Richard Page was involved in a massive money laundering scheme, funneling dirty money through his real estate empire. She had been gathering evidence, planning to expose him, and that's when the threat started. The notes, the phone calls, the stalking, it was all meant to scare her into silence. But Jessica wasn't the type to back down. She had been building a case against Page, preparing to go public, and that's why she had been so paranoid in the days leading up to her disappearance. She knew her life was in danger. Ward felt the weight of the revelation crash over him. Jessica hadn't just been a victim of circumstance, she had been silenced because she knew too much. And now the same forces that had silenced her were coming for anyone who got too close to the truth. With the new evidence in hand, Ward knew he was running out of time. He confronted Page again, this time armed with the emails and the knowledge of Jessica's investigation. But Page's response was chilling. "You think you can stop this?" Page sneered. "I've been doing this for years, detective. You can't touch me. No one can." The threat was real, and Ward knew it, but he wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not when he was so close to getting justice for Jessica. The story reached its climax when Ward received an anonymous tip, leading him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Inside, he found the evidence he needed to finally take down Richard Page: stacks of documents, wire transfers, and incriminating files that tied Page to a network of corrupt officials and dirty money. But as Ward sifted through the evidence, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, and there, standing in the shadows, was Ethan Grant. "I didn't want it to end this way," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "But Jessica, she wouldn't stop. She was going to ruin everything." Ward's heart raced as Ethan pulled a gun from his jacket. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. Ethan had been working with Page all along. He had lured Jessica into the relationship, manipulated her, and when she got too close to the truth, he helped orchestrate her disappearance. But before Ethan could pull the trigger, Ward lunged at him, knocking the gun from his hand. In the struggle, Ethan slipped, falling into a stack of crates, and was knocked unconscious. When the police arrived, they found enough evidence to arrest both Ethan and Paige. The conspiracy was exposed and justice at long last was served. But as Ward stood outside the warehouse watching the ambulances and police cars drive away, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were still secrets lurking in the shadows. Jessica had uncovered a monster, but who else was out there, hiding in the darkness, waiting to be revealed? In the end, the truth had come out, but the cost had been high, and the town of Albany would never be the same. As Ward drove away, he knew that this case would haunt him for the rest of his career, because some secrets, no matter how deeply they're buried, always find a way to the surface, and when they do, the consequences are devastating. The days following the arrest of Ethan Grant and Richard Page were a blur of media coverage, court proceedings, and investigations into the wider conspiracy that Jessica Collins had uncovered. As the town of Albany buzzed with the shocking revelations, Detective Samuel Ward found himself in the center of it all, hailed as the hero who had brought justice to the town. But even as the dust began to settle, Ward couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still missing. He replayed the events over and over in his mind. The arrests, the evidence, the confessions. It all made sense. Yet there was a loose end, one that kept tugging at the back of his thoughts. The anonymous tip that had led him to the warehouse. Who had sent it? And why now, after all these months of dead ends? As Ward sat in his office staring at the case files stacked on his desk, his phone buzzed. A new message flashed on the screen. There's more. Meet me at the pier tonight. Alone. His pulse quickened. The sender was anonymous, but Ward had learned not to ignore messages like this. He grabbed his coat and left the station without telling anyone. The pier was deserted when he arrived, the waves gently lapping against the wooden beams beneath him. The air was thick with fog, and the streetlights cast eerie glows over the water. For a moment, Ward wondered if he was walking into a trap. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Veronica. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the water. "After everything that happened with Ethan and Richard, I found something in Jessica's things. I didn't want to believe it, but now I'm scared." Ward's heart pounded as Veronica handed him a small, battered notebook. It was Jessica's. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widening with each entry. It was a log, dates, times, names, and places. But there was one name that appeared more than any other. Senator William Brooks. Senator Brooks was a highly respected figure in the community, known for his philanthropic work and his involvement in local politics. But according to Jessica's notes, he was more than just a politician. He was the linchpin in a much larger operation, one that reached far beyond the money laundering scheme Richard Page had been involved in. "He's the one who covered it all up," Veronica said, her voice trembling. "Jessica found out, and that's why they killed her." Ward's mind raced. If what Veronica was saying was true, then the conspiracy wasn't over. In fact, it was even bigger than he had imagined. But how could he go after someone as powerful as Senator Brooks without putting a target on his own back? As Ward pieced together the final part of the puzzle, he realized the enormity of what he was about to expose. Jessica's death wasn't just a crime of passion or a business cover-up. It was part of a meticulously planned operation involving some of the most influential people in the state. He knew he had to act fast, but he also knew he couldn't trust anyone, perhaps not even his own colleagues at the station. Ward took the notebook and thanked Veronica, promising her that he would do everything in his power to bring those responsible to justice. But as she walked away, Ward couldn't help but feel that the walls were closing in. Every step he took closer to the truth made him a bigger target. That night, Ward worked tirelessly, connecting the dots between the names in Jessica's notebook and the broader conspiracy. He uncovered ties between Brooks and several high-profile figures, judges, business leaders, even law enforcement officials. They had all played a part in keeping the operation under wraps, ensuring that anyone who got too close was silenced. The deeper Ward dug, the more dangerous it became. His phone buzzed constantly with cryptic messages, warning him to back off. But Ward wasn't one to back down, especially not when he was this close. Finally, he had enough evidence to confront Brooks. He arranged a meeting in a secluded location, knowing that this could be the most dangerous move of his career. When Brooks arrived, he was calm, collected, and utterly unfazed by the accusations. "You think you can bring me down?" Brooks asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "I've been doing this for decades, detective. I've buried more secrets than you can even imagine." Ward stood his ground, the weight of the notebook in his jacket pocket giving him confidence. "You can't hide forever, Brooks. The truth always comes out." But as the words left his mouth, a black SUV screeched to a halt nearby. Men in suits stepped out, their faces cold and expressionless. Ward's heart sank. This was it, the moment he had been dreading. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and alone. But just as they moved toward him, a voice rang out from behind. "Let him go." Ward turned to see Veronica standing at the edge of the clearing holding a camera. She had been recording the entire exchange. The men stopped in their tracks, uncertainty flickering across their faces. "If you touch him, this goes public," Veronica said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "And trust me, it's all going to come out." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, Brooks waved his hand and the men retreated. "This isn't over," Brooks muttered before getting back into his car and speeding away. Ward exhaled, relief washing over him. But he knew Veronica was right. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. In the weeks that followed, Ward and Veronica worked together to build a case against Brooks and his associates. It was a dangerous game, but they had the evidence they needed to bring the whole operation crashing down. And finally, after months of investigation, the case went public. The arrests made headlines across the country. Brooks and his cronies were exposed for the criminals they were, and justice was finally served. But even as Ward stood in front of the cameras, giving interviews about the case that had rocked the nation, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were still more secrets out there waiting to be uncovered. Because in a town like Albany, where power and corruption run deep, there's always another layer to the truth. And some secrets are never truly buried.